I will say good day to you this day of your time. How are you all? All right. Thank you. We would like to once again extend to each and every one of you individually and all of you together collectively our deep appreciation at the co-creation of this interaction this day of your time. We also extend our deep gratitude for the opportunity to interact with each and every one of you in this way. We would like to begin this transmission this day of your time with what we will title Essani Stories. And in this transmission, we would like to share with you an Essani story about Essani Storytellers. In our world, as you know, we are generally telepathic with each other. Our world, were you to visit it, would appear to be very quiet because no one is talking. The idea, thus, of having a telepathic connection, telepathic connection with all the people on our planet may still be expressed in very specifically focused ways. Not everyone is connected to everyone consciously all the time in terms of what information they may need to tap into. It is simply based on the synchronicity of what an individual may need to be telepathically aware of at any given moment that makes them aware and connects them to whatever other individuals or groups in our society are, in a sense, transmitting whatever information they synchronistically need to know at that particular moment. So in other words, not everyone is listening in to everyone else all the time, even though we are always all connected. Thus then the idea, just as on your own world, is that there are specific bits of information that serve specific individuals or groups at specific times and specific timings. And we have, in our world, a group of individuals who have chosen to function in much the same way that we have defined the group that I belong to, which are called first contact specialists, who are engaged in the idea of initiating and creating dialogues in an ongoing manner or in the first contact with certain civilizations that eventually may join our interstellar alliance. There are groups of people that we call the storytellers. The storytellers are those that once contact is made, be it in the manner that we are doing now in this way, or be it in that we have established open contact with the world, and that they have the opportunity to go, in that sense, physically to visit those civilizations. The storytellers are those that will take the information gleaned from the stories of any particular civilization and will thus come back to Essani with those stories firmly embedded in their minds, and will thus then provide those stories, those points of view, that information to our society as is needed by any individual within our society according to the synchronistic timing that they need that information. So these storytellers perform a very particular function, in a sense, as you would say, of downloading and uploading information from a variety of civilizations. They are, in that sense, very much like the bees on your planet that go and gather honey and allow the hive, in that sense, to partake of what they bring back, sharing and exchanging information from dozens upon dozens of civilizations, learning their stories. For here is the important point. What you also experience on your own world is that information is most often retained most strongly in the form of stories. If you understand what is called story structure, as is related by the storytellers on your own planet in a variety of fashions and forms, you will understand something very important about story and story structure and why the telling of stories is one of the most powerful ways to transmit and retain information in your world. All the things you remember most about information have been told to you in terms of story structure. And that is why you retain it, because it is in story structure. But why should that be? I will tell you. Thank you. Many people talk about the idea of archetypes on your planet, and they recognize that archetypes are symbols that represent certain facets and aspects of your consciousness. And when you tell a story, many times you use many different kinds of archetypes in the telling of that story to represent certain ideas, certain energies. But the idea is that story structure is itself an archetype. Story structure is embedded in your consciousness, in your physiological personality. When you crystallize your energy into the time-space continuum format, when you construct the physiological mind, the physical ego structure out of the space-time energy, in that sense, when you impose that structure on your consciousness to create physical personality, automatically embedded within that structure is the vibration called story. It is the innate format in which information is communicated most strongly and retained most strongly by your physical mind, by your ego structure. This is why, as children, you can never get enough stories. That's how you learn. Tell me that story, mother, father. Tell me that story again. Tell me that story again. Tell me that story again. The idea being that you always learn something new. You glean something new because it is all there in the story structure. If the story structure of your story matches the story structure that is innately, inherently embedded within your consciousness, then you will pluck all the right chords. The stories that you call lasting, the stories that you call classic, are so because they are matching the story structure in your consciousness. They hit all the right tones, all the right chords, and in that way are automatically embedding themselves through vibration into your consciousness, and you retain them that way. Those stories that do not incorporate the idea of all of the elements of the natural story structure that is automatically archetypally embedded in your consciousness do not resonate with you. You feel, though you do not necessarily always know how to say it, that somehow it didn't quite hit you, that something is missing, that it didn't quite tell the story the way it needed to be told, that you do not identify with it, you do not feel it in your heart, your mind, your spirit, your soul, you do not feel it in your bones. The idea thus is that if you will understand and learn what story structure is and how it is represented archetypally in your consciousness automatically, then when you communicate with others those things that you believe and feel are most importantly representative of who and what you are and what your excitement is all about, finding a way to communicate the idea not in dry facts, but in the idea of telling of the story of who and what you are, telling the story that excites you. Always be the way to garner the interest of others, because you will be playing that tune, you will be striking those chords, hitting those harmonics that resonate within their consciousness in the story structure that is already embedded within their personality structure. Learning to communicate with each other in the form of story, be it the idea that it appears that way obviously, or be it that it is more cleverly embedded in the way you communicate, doesn't matter. It doesn't even have to be in the order that you typically think it needs to be, as long as it contains all the elements and strikes the right chords at the right time. The idea is that if you learn to communicate who and what you are in that format, more and more, you will find that your communications will be, in that sense, more clearly heard. Doesn't always mean that individuals must, in that sense, match the vibration of your story. Doesn't mean that your story always has to be compatible with others. But the idea is that you will more clearly explain what the story is that you are living, what the story is that you are all about, what the story is that you desire to experience in your world. Become storytellers, tellers of the story that is your story, the story of your world, the story of your culture, the story of your individuality, the story of your explorations and experiences. Finding, learning, understanding story will allow you to become the kinds of communicators that will begin to spread those stories around your world. Look at the ideas when you share information between nations on your planet. You are telling stories of your culture, stories of your nation, stories of your experience, so that other individuals may be inspired. You are listening to stories from other cultures so that you may be inspired, so that you may inspire each other to learn new stories, to tell new stories, to create new stories, new adventures, new understandings, new experiences, and create your world to be a completely unfolding story of ecstatic exploration. Look even to your language to understand the idea. For even in those stories you have experienced in what you call your space-time framework that you refer to as the past, you refer to it as his story, history. Her story as well, her story, if you wish. But look at you, automatically, instinctively have embedded the word story in the idea of all that you have experienced. It is a story. It is told as a story, and that's why you connect to it, why you remember it, why you relate to it. On our world, the storytellers will go, as we say, to many different civilizations, allowing the idea of the experiences in those civilizations which may be similar to ours to be absorbed, allowing the experiences which may be very different than ours to be absorbed. But in this way, obviously, thus translated into archetypal symbols that are germane for our civilization, in much the same way that in communicating what is going on with our civilization to your civilization, and in communicating what is going on in your civilization to our civilization, there are symbologies that are used, archetypal symbologies, to allow for a translation to occur, because many things that occur in our world and other worlds do not relate to yours. Many things that happen in your world certainly do not relate to other worlds. And so there must always be the translation, which is always part of the telling of the story, is learning how to tell a story in ways that will relate to a number of different ways of translation. Giving the idea of the vibration of an overall story, using the archetypal template, hitting the right chords, will allow you to tell a story in a manner that another person will automatically be capable of translating into the language they understand, because the story structure is universal. So even though you may be utilizing certain archetypal forms that are specific to your culture to tell a story to another culture, if you hit the right chords and tell that story in the proper story structure, the other culture will basically get the understanding, get the gist of your story, even though some of the archetypal symbols within the story may be very foreign or alien to them. But they will understand the essence of the story. And thus they will be capable of telling that story again in a number of different ways, allowing the proper archetypal symbols that are different for each color to take their place in that culture, in whatever culture is listening to the story, so that the translation can be understood. So in all the things that we have said about our culture to you, we are always allowing the translation to occur through the channel's brain with the vocabulary that he was raised to understand, to pick the subjects, pick the words, pick the terms, pick the definitions that most closely relate to the ideas that we are transmitting, because we are transmitting them according to the idea of the story structure that is common to both of our realities, to both of our civilizations, to any structure of consciousness that embeds itself in the idea or understanding of physical reality at all, or can relate to physical reality in any way, shape, or form. They'll understand the idea of story structure. Now, of course, As we have said, in spirit form, in non-physical realities, the idea of time and space is very different. The idea of focus of consciousness is very different. Nevertheless, the idea of story structure to some degree even holds sway there. Because the idea is that they create their own time frame, yes. They may do things in a completely different order than you do, yes. But again, as long as those vibrations are had, as long as those chords are plucked, as long as the resonance of the story structure is there, they will relate to it, because this permeates many different kinds of levels. The idea really is that the entirety of creation is a story. It is embedded in all that is, and all things and all cultures and all dimensions and all beings are a story that all that is telling to itself. You are the story unfolding of all that is. On that scale, you are a story. On your own level, you are a story. On many levels in between, there are stories. There are stories all the way up and down the framework of existence, even to those dimensions that you would consider existing so far below in density, so far below in vibration, there are still stories. They may be heard differently, they may be experienced differently, but there are still stories. And information is still communicated using the story structure of consciousness as it relates to that specific realm or dimension of experience. So become storytellers. Learn what that's all about. On our world, as has been explained in our ancient language, called Essani, place of the people, place of living light. The Essani people, living light, is the translation. We understand that our story is different than yours in many ways and similar in other ways. In that we are a hybrid civilization created out of your civilization and another culture from a parallel reality that you have referred to as the Grays. And there being 5 hybrid civilizations of which we are one. The idea thus then is that we have our own stories and different kinds of experiences, some again different and similar to your own. But primarily where we share most strongly is in the concept of the stories of family, because we are connected to you. You are our family in many different ways. And so we communicate to you along the lines of understanding that we are family. We also understand the commonality between us as creators, that we are inventors, we are creators, we are beings who experience the concept of joy and love and ecstasy, just as you can as well, and even more than you do already. But we do not have stories of fear in our world that you may have in your world. We know that fear exists. We know that choice exists, but we simply choose other stories. It is up to you also to learn to choose other stories other than fearful ones, if that is what you prefer. You will never lose your understanding. You will never lose your ability to choose the idea of fear. You will always find actually more and more ability to choose fear. You will always become more aware of the negative side as you expand the positive. Because as you become more of who you are, you become more aware of all possible choices. So the idea is not that fear goes away as a choice. It is simply that the experience of fear is not chosen. That you choose stories that are relevant to the idea of your acknowledgement of yourself as a being of light, your acknowledgement of yourself as an aspect of creation in the way that resonates most strongly with the vibration of your preference in the moment as you choose to exist, in every moment that you choose to exist from a different perspective of the same moment. Because it is all one moment. It is all now. Every now that you experience is simply the same now from a different point of view. And you tell yourself a different story. And as you tell yourself a story, you create the shifts of different parallel reality experiences that you have. As you tell yourself a story, you create the experience of the shift that you go through from parallel reality to parallel reality. You are designing your experience based on the story you tell yourself that is most true for you, on the story you relate to most strongly with your belief systems. So if you do not prefer the story you are experiencing, then tell yourselves a different story. Tell me another story, Mother. Tell me another story, Father. Happily ever after. Tell yourself that story. Happily now, happily ever after. You will have your challenges, for what is a story without challenges? Because that is one of the resonant points of storytelling. There must be a challenge, and there must be transformation. And that is all right. Because in telling yourself the story that way, you will tell yourself the story that allows you to know that you have the ability to transform the challenge into something that expands your story, something that works for you, something that resonates most closely with who it is you believe yourself to be. Tell yourself the story that you know is true for you. Be the storyteller to yourself, just as all that is telling itself the story of all that it is. Through all of you, through all of us, through all beings in creation, it is telling itself the story of who and what it is through all the different perspectives it has created itself to be, through all the aspects, all the pieces, all the stories. An infinite array of stories is all that is made of. It is one giant experience of a multitude, an infinite multitude of stories and perspectives about itself, thus experiencing itself in all the ways, in all the stories that it can. Existence is one big story. Goes on and on and on and never ends. You can decide what aspect of that story you get to experience yourself to be. Tell yourself the story you prefer to be, for you are an unfolding story. Always, 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 and forever. Now then, on our world, we also relate to many different levels of our planet in that sense. What you call the idea of the beings that are like us and the beings that are not. The animal beings, the tree beings, the rock beings, the star beings, the energy beings, all the different kinds of beings, even as many indigenous cultures on your planet relate to these things as people, relate to these realms, these dimensions, these worlds as their own stories, different kinds of stories. But you can share their stories as well. And the story structure will work for them as well. So when you allow yourself to really understand and learn and master story structure, being that it is, again, archetypally embedded in your consciousness, you will realize it is archetypally embedded in the consciousness of all the other kinds of beings on your planet as well. So that when you share information or wish to learn information from them, if you approach them through the idea of tell me a story or let me tell you a story, and learn the idea of how to communicate through story structure, it will be easier for you to understand the stories of many other beings as well. This is the innate template of communication. Story structure is what it's called on your planet. It is the innate template of communication. Let me give you an example also of how this template works in translation in a variety of different ways. Many of you know that when we are conducting these kinds of channelings, these kinds of transmissions to your world, we are engaged with the intelligence of what is called our ships, our computers on the ships, which are self-aware beings and actually are extensions of our own consciousness. A ship, in a sense, a spaceship for us, in a sense, is a crystallized form of our own higher mind. And we are constantly in communion with it, in communicating these ideas to you. The sentence as follows: this is the template in the way the ship understands this concept, using story structure. Planetary symbol, linguistic, temporal, archetypal, idiomatic, interactive communication. Planetary symbol, linguistic, temporal, archetypal, interactive, idiomatic communication. That is our ship's way of saying your world is getting smaller every day. Planetary symbol, your world. Linguistic, idiomatic, an idiom from your own language to represent archetypal interactivity in a temporal fashion. Your world, in your language, idiomatically, is getting smaller every day. Interactivity is increasing and accelerating. But that phrase is how our ship translates that story structure, using the template in its most raw form, because that's all the ship needs to do. There are not the nuances of culture for the ship. The ship is just a raw template format of communication of the raw story structure in its most simplistic archetypal formats as far as the ship understands. But this is the process that is going on, and us transmitting these communications through that template of the ship, through the story structure our own society understands, that our ship uses to translate into the idiomatic phrasing that makes sense and resonates within the channel's consciousness to bring up the translations necessary for this communication. So, it gives you a little bit of understanding of the different kinds of translation processes that go on, but still work to tell the story. Even though it may seem very alien and very foreign to you to hear it in the raw template form and not really translate in that form to you, it automatically, using that template, automatically, in a sense, pulls through and from the channel the idea of the appropriate terminologies that are idiomatically representative in your culture to represent what it is we are transmitting from ours. Because if we were to simply transmit it in direct form as we understand it, the communication would be too alien for you to understand. It would not translate into your language in a way that would make sense, as we have just demonstrated with the raw, in a sense, template form. Does that make sense? All right. So this gives you a demonstration of how these translations occur in these transmissions, and why sometimes it takes a little time, in your terms of time, for channeling to be something that is, shall we say, improved upon and practiced, so that bit by bit, as the channels allow themselves to relax into the story structure of their being, we can pluck the necessary chords more quickly, more automatically, more effortlessly, to allow the idea of the template to bring forth from the channels exactly what needs to be said, more and more fluidly and fluently every single time the channel allows such things to come through. Does that make sense? All right. We will in time talk more about many aspects of our culture as it relates to this concept of story. But at this time, in exchange for the gift that you are giving us in sharing these ideas of our story with you, we ask you now, how may we be of service in allowing you to share your stories with us? But let's take a day to you this day of your time. How are you all? All right. We thank you once again for the co-creation of this interaction, and we thank you for allowing us to share our perspective, our point of view, our experiences with you for 30 of your orbits around your central star. Doesn't sound like much when you say it that way. Just 30 times around the sun, that's all. But we know that in your reality, a lot happens in one orbit. And so we know that in the information that you have decided, that you have chosen to apply, to incorporate into your own lives, that we have reflected to you the information that your higher minds already know, that we are simply happy to remind you of what you have forgotten. We thank you for your willingness to incorporate whatever it is you believe that you prefer, whatever it is that allows you to be more of your true selves, for when you choose to do that, it creates a reality, a new reality that we can share more and more